Okay, and welcome to another series. Today we're going to go over new chemicals, and we're going to go over new ideas that we have discovered since our last portion. Today we're going to go over liver disease and the unique hugeness of this idea about liver disease and how many false, I would say, a completely new makeover is what we're looking at. Something so huge that it would reveal a very well knit society. Okay, liver disease. For us, we woke up the other night and we had a dream about getting old, as we're into the Bible, the Hindu Vedic system, taller statues from Egypt, and the fact that other societies do live for a long time, and so we're into that slightly. And but it seems that the bird is our adversary a lot of times and has with him an arsenal of people who he is affiliated with. But we've gone over those before, and I recently had a friend who died of liver disease at a very young age. He was black, and so but I did get the photos of his medical doctors, and what I have today is staggering. What I have today is inevitably going to cure liver, and it's such an easy technique also. And also we're going to describe some other chemicals to fulfill or to add on to some of the stuff for skinny scandos. So we're going to do two things, if not more. So let me see here. Let's start off at what is a chemical. Just a real quick recap. 50-50 green eyes would be prayed for before conception for those green eyes. His brother feels left out, brown eyes, and doesn't like green eyes. One notch up towards Ethiopia on light-skinned black does like green eyes and will change the communicative path using, and that's because of prayer before conception, using lower back chemical cameo nostrils breathe. Lower back chemical cameo nostrils breathe. That also shows that the communicative path does exist, and that these are called tracts and valves also. Okay, and going, and we'll go back into the shoulder, the chemical that it has, how it differs greatly, dramatically, how we can add on still to the basis of the prior episodes that we've had, or segments that we've had. Now, let's go over to liver disease. So, what we're finding is that bones produce marrow, and that if you get burnt, that your body's going to secrete huge amounts of flesh. The things that jelly beans and jello are made out of are from bone marrow. And there are two types of bones, and we're going to go over those two types of bones while using black, because we're going to be slightly different on our white side. So one type of bone is a dry bone, and a dry bone is because of Dubai, and Dubai goes into India. India is a medical nation, and this only means that medical people who have gone through injury of some sort can add on to their dictionaries, and we're not going to be any different out here. Okay, so we're going to say that bones are very medical. That means that a starfish can chop off his arm and rejuvenate his limb. We say that the spine and the bones are going to be roughly calibrated like that. And but if you look at a dry bone sequence, you'll see that if you're black, and we're going to use black for this one, you can easily use white, that the bones aren't racist. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. The bones aren't racist. But you'll feel those bones click over. And the other bone is going to be a soggy bone. The soggy bones are going to emit chemicals. And a lot of people could use these bones for chemicals when dealing with old age. Evidently, starfish can rejuvenate their limbs and feel brand new. Okay. So back to the jelly beans and jello. Jello and jelly beans, that wiggly stuff that allows for it to become jello and jelly bean, comes from, they say, marrow of an animal. And I don't eat meat, so that is highly despicable. A different form is using fruits, marrow. In a nutshell, that a fruit, and us being like a fruit. Oh, and also if you put an afro around the soggy bones, you'll see everything connect dramatically. And that's going to be on black side. That could have everything to do with the liver disease. You hear black people suffer for it more. I don't think that it's alcohol related. I have seen people who are alcoholics for a long time in their life, and they didn't have liver disease until they were older. And I do think that black is targeted greatly, and I do think that we are in a top secret scenario, and that is so huge that it would overturn major threaded societies, including medical doctors. Okay, now as you look at a fruit, you'll see that there's a track for marrow and that there is a track for water. And as you look at people who have liver disease, what you should be finding is that their flesh looks soggy. Can anybody say why their flesh looks soggy? Perfect. Because the marrow of soggy bones would be secreted, but what we don't know is that outside influence is able to use intervisionary dreamlike frequencies that substitute for other organ parts. So the bird is very wise in this point, and we have some biblical references real quick. Joseph means bird in the Bible. He goes into Egypt. One thing he does discover is that birds will eat the brains, and that bird, his name, Joseph himself, was a inner vision interpreter. He was a dream interpreter. Joseph was. Okay. Does this mean that Joseph, which means bird, is a dream interpreter? Could mean that. Could mean that birds are very in tune with their surrounding area. Could also mean that the poison that we were feeling when we went to the jungles, that the bird was there, of course, and that there is a small hip gland that is connected to a small grip around the abdomen, which can poison the body if put in a different way. What we have found is that some of these poisons will be activated in a neutral lining spectrum body for very great purposes in the future. So we want to look at that also as future related and past tense related simultaneously, put a note there. But getting back to the liver disease. Liver disease, at this point, patients should have what is soggy flesh. I've heard people say they needed water, but I've never heard of this next thing. And this is going to prove without a shadow of doubt that we're going to align two tracks side by side with each other, and one track is going to be almost radioactive. That means that it has been induced by outside influence. And okay, and so what we're going to do is go to that valve next to the marrow valve, which a fruit has marrow valve, which can produce jelly beans, and bones can produce jelly beans, secreting the fat, which happens usually in birth victims. They secrete huge amounts of fat. Those secretions can be used still to make jelly beans and jello, but fruit still is able to make jelly beans and jello. And right next to that valve is going to be a water valve and a fruit. And right next to our valve is going to be a water valve. And we're going to look at black side today, and it's a pretty interesting conspiracy about the chemicals of black being used by the other side. But here we have a huge amount of water valve by black. And I can't tell if it's because he is from the heat, but what we do have is intervisionary sweat to finish that off, and the duoplexity of lining up intervisionary outside influence with intervisionary our own, however using a different valve than the marrow valve. Okay, and by using a different valve than the marrow valve, you will see water go into the bones. And what's interesting about black at this point is that he has a huge amount of water, almost like a cameo has a huge amount of water. And it doesn't say that white doesn't have a huge amount of water. I just think it is perplexing that black has a huge amount of water at this time. I also think it's very perplexing that the medical doctors don't have a cure for liver disease. I think it's perplexing. I also think it starts to get very strange and odd that they're actually behind liver disease. And they're going to be put on my list of people who are affiliated with this bird or bird affiliated with them, and so on and so forth. And so we are done with this criminal research. We do have allies, by the way, and we do have people following us all the time. So it's not like that. Okay. Well, then here's what we do have. Right now, you can just go ahead and hold up your trophy. Okay, we've already discovered the disembowelment of liver disease. We figured that out. And yet, nobody else has figured that out in a long time. There's a reason for that. There's a cover-up. Okay. Now, wow, my friend just died of liver disease. And he was very young. And yet, you put that afro, you have a little bit of black in you, and try and put the afro around a soggy bone versus a dry bone, which can click over. Bones are non-racist in a desert. Just recognizing bones are frequented for the health world. Starfish can rejuvenate their limbs. Their bones are designed like that. You will see that soggy bones versus dry bones should be the reason for that soggy flesh. Okay, so you want to find a valve that produces a lot of water. We're going to use black. It's not that white can't do it. We're going to use black on this one. I'm going to say black is quite odd. Black is producing more water. And you want to look for the intervisionary, by the way, and line those intervisionary parts up. And there you will see stagnation given from outside influence. I mean, it's perplexing. Almost radioactive. But you'll see our valves discommunicate one from the other. And you'll see that the water has a multitude of functions at this point. Okay? So I hope that we went over that normally enough. It's going to be intervisionary from sweat glands. That's going to take up the activity of a disturbed and influenced, outside influenced intervisionary spectrum. Animated portions versus non-animated portions of the body. All right, let's go over to the new chemical we found in the shoulders. And wow, what an interesting discovery, which takes us way past where we were at, and it definitely scores a slam dunk. It also shows one more calibration of communication, meaning average intervisionary that we've been dealing with have been very simple gas producers. This one seems to use one more whole sentence worth of calibration. It's going to come from the shoulders thus far. We're going to say that, start from the beginning again. Use your right side. We're starting over here like you would your left side. You're going to tap, that's on a 2-to-1 ratio. You're going to tap twice on your right side and watch all of the marrow and all of the cavities, the inner cavities, go over the vertebrae. This is going to leave a deep, dark black hole where you can start throwing stuff in that vertebrae, and some of your organs will get lost. We're now very familiar with the fact that the abdomen is the main ingredient to the snap-on, snap-off portions of the body. Things that act like they snap-on, snap-off will stay dormant unless they are activated. Or let's say the body is going down a straight line, it just takes a curve here, and it's most likely for your health. Most likely it's because of outside influences, posture and positioning by people who might be trying to influence you. And if their posture is off, then many of the curves would be fitting for that purpose. But we like to leave the terminology blank so that the mind can consume from a very neutral gathering port also, because a lot of the inner consciousnesses revolve around that idea. So what we have found is that, of course, that as we go into the snap-on portions, as we get into the jelly belly, blubbery belly, and we recognize that its inner light is going to be key for snap-on, snap-off portions, that we find that the shoulder pops back up, and that a small chemical from the shoulder will almost communicate two parts of the body. And you want to go via chemical, because what chemicals do, and neutralizing chemicals, as we saw before from the lower back chemical caminoxidase breathe, they simply roll over other chemical agents, and they kind of tear down and allow for easy fructose to move around. So what we have found are a pair of, and this is for us, a pair of sweet lips. Those lips will come back when they communicate and fulfill that one sentence longer variable. We also found what seems to be in the entire intervisionary of the abdomen, belly itself. We also found that fingers are going to be a huge portion of the drawing over of everything, and that what the shoulder looks like is almost a compressor, contractor, opening and closing variations. And those are called intervisionaries. Once you start to see their animations come out, those are animated spirits versus non-animated spirits. Animated spirits seem to be able to be induced by outside influence. They seem to be able to be induced by outside influence. Okay, and so what you want to do is look for an accumulation of jelly belly, 2-to-1 ratios, cavities, interpulpal portions of the fruit. And you also want to look for this next part, shoulder. You want to recognize the shoulder's chemical as being very high active. The chemical is being a very sedative chemical over other chemicals. Okay, and you want to look for those intervisionary parts like what seems to be the belly. and I got a pair of sweet lips. And you also feel fingers move for the first time. And what you're easily able to do after that is complete where you would have been in its terminology from where your shoulder portions, which are now connected to jelly belly and other organs, and the pulpier portions, the cavities of the fruit, all coming over at one time, yet the stuff feels amazing. It also feels like there's an extra additive amount of communication at that time. Okay, and so that is going to be today's episode. 2 new staggering things. Don't forget, somebody's getting chopped down, period, in the medical world. And the investigations are just starting. And my friend Ali is going to be amongst what I consider to be a thorough guinea pig farm. People who are practicing on other people and victimizing them in the spiritual world. And we live in a spiritual world. Therefore, commercials like NuvaRing really show, and that was when you saw those eyeballs, and it looked like it had a ring in that eyeball. It looked like those eyes were alive. In that photo from Michelangelo, you see that one guy, his arms are out. You see another guy in there. And we can't forget about the pre-designated area of travel for what's in jar for those spiritual people. Because that is in Iran, Iraq somewhere, with a two-faced, two-armed individual from the Black and Caspian Seas with wings as Saudi Arabia. And that's going to show the pre-designated area of travel for what's in jar. And that goes over the spine, not touching the spine. It hardly ever goes up to the brain. Therefore, those extra spirits which are inside that body usually sink deep into the most healthy portions of the body, which are all considered to be pre-designated areas of travel for what's in jar. Okay, and that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. You guys definitely have to stay safe. And I will take a calculation of how many nurses we know. Which, by the way, one last note is by the time you finish medical school, you're going to be dumber than you were before. How about we all start our own college by doing our own research? We already know that we have defeated liver disease. We know we have. Okay? All right, until next time. This is Chester Chestnut. William Chester Chestnut. Talk to you later. Stay safe. Bye.